If I had known what that night would bring, I never would have stepped foot in that ballroom. I would have made up some excuse, faked a headache, claimed I had to work late, anything to avoid what I was about to witness. But I went. Nain had insisted, saying it was important for me to meet her colleagues, to finally see the people she spent so much of her time with. The way she said it unsettled me, like she had something to prove. But I didn't push. I never pushed. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was ignoring the unease that settled in my gut the moment we arrived at the hotel. It wasn't the kind of work event I had expected. This was too lavish, too intimate. The kind of corporate gathering where the alcohol flowed freely and personal boundaries blurred under the dim glow of chandeliers. I had never been one for these kinds of affairs, but I played along, shaking hands, nodding at small talk, watching as Nain moved effortlessly through the crowd. And then I saw him. He was standing too close, laughing too easily. And Nain, she wasn't just responding to his attention. She was welcoming it, leaning into him in a way she hadn't leaned into me in months. I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was imagining things. But then I saw it. The way his hand rested on the small of her back. The way she didn't flinch. And then she spoke. Oh, he's just a good acquaintance. A good acquaintance. I stood there, my heart pounding in my ears, watching my wife smile at another man as if I was nothing more than a passing thought. And in that moment, the illusion shattered. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time slip. This had history. And suddenly, every inconsistency, every late night, every distant conversation over the past few months snapped into focus. I could have confronted her. I could have made a scene. But instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I let go. I let go of my assumptions, my denial of her. I didn't need proof. I didn't need her justifications. I just needed to walk away. But not yet. Leaving immediately would have been too easy for her. Instead, I stayed. I watched. I wanted to see if she would flinch, if she would show even the slightest hint of guilt. But she didn't. She was too good at this. The ballroom was alive with music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, but all of it faded into the background. My world had shrunk to just two people, my wife and the man she had so effortlessly dismissed as just an acquaintance. I studied him. He wasn't particularly handsome, nor did he have the kind of charm that made women swoon. But he had something else. Confidence. A smugness that came from knowing he had already won. And Nain, she was glowing. Not the way she used it with me, but in a way that felt effortless, natural. Like she wasn't pretending anymore. And that's when it hit me. I was the one she had been pretending with. My grip tightened around my glass as I forced myself to remain composed. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Not yet. Then the music changed. A slow song. The kind meant for couples. Around us, pairs drifted toward the dance floor, swaying under the chandeliers. And then he did it. He reached for her hand. A bold move. A deliberate one. I expected her to pull away, to glance around nervously, to acknowledge my presence in some way. But she didn't. Instead, she let out a soft laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in years, and let him lead her away. I should have left, but I stayed. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the need for one final confirmation. I watched them dance. Not in the stiff, formal way colleagues might at an event like this. No, this was practice. Intimate. He knew exactly where to place his hands, how to guide her, how to make her smile. And then she leaned in, whispering something into his ear. Close enough that I saw the way his grip on her waist tightened. Close enough that I felt the final crack in my chest. I set my drink down. My mind was made up. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to demand explanations. I wasn't going to fight for someone who had already moved on. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her either. I didn't storm out. I didn't throw my drink or make a scene. That would have given her too much power, too much importance. Instead, I stood there, watching her dance with him as if I were already a ghost in her life. And maybe I had been for months. I thought back to all the little signs, the late nights, the secrecy, the way she had stopped really seeing me. I had explained them all away. She was just stressed. She was just tired. No, she wasn't tired. She was tired of me. A strange calm settled over me as I took one final sip of champagne and set the empty glass down. There was no point in confronting her. I already knew the truth. I wasn't going to fight for a place in her world. I was going to disappear from it entirely. Moving through the crowd, I made my way toward the bar at the far end of the room. From there, I had the perfect vantage point. I could see everything without being seen. And that's when I noticed something else. Other people were watching too. Colleagues, friends, even a few of her closest work acquaintances. They whispered among themselves, stealing glances. Some looked amused, others uncomfortable. But no one looked surprised. And that was the final confirmation I needed. This wasn't new. Everyone knew. Everyone except me. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers against the cool of the bar. My heartbeat drummed steadily in my temples, but outwardly, I remained still. If they had all seen it happening, how long had it been going on? Weeks? Months? Years? I turned toward the mirror behind the bar, catching my own reflection. The man staring back at me wasn't the same one who had walked into this ballroom. His eyes were colder, sharper, detached. That's when I knew I wasn't going home tonight. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over my banking app before I finally opened it, transferring a significant amount into a private account she had no access to. Then, without hesitation, I opened my email and typed out my resignation letter. I wasn't just leaving her. I was leaving everything. The job I had taken to support our life together. The city we had built our routine around. The future I had once believed in. She had already moved on. Now, so had I. I didn't walk out of that ballroom like a broken man. No, that wasn't how I wanted to remember this night. I walked out like a man who had made a choice. Not as a fool who had just discovered the truth, but as someone who had already decided what needed to be done. The night air was crisp against my skin as I stepped outside, loosening my tie. The city pulsed around me. The hum of distant traffic, the occasional laughter from a nearby bar. I wasn't angry, not in the way people might expect. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want answers. I just wanted to be free. I took out my phone, scrolled to my contacts, and landed on the one person I knew I could trust. Theo. We had been friends since college, before careers, before marriages, before life got complicated. I hit dial. He picked up on the third ring. You better have a damn good reason for calling me this late. His voice was thick with sleep. I exhaled. I do. There was no anger in me, no frustration, only curiosity. The kind that comes when you step outside of your life and see it from a new perspective, detached and weightless. I need a place to crash, I said, watching my breath swirl into the cold night air. A beat of silence passed before Theo responded. Did you finally come to your senses about Nain? I let out a quiet chuckle and shook my head. Something like that. Another pause, then a sigh. Yeah, you can stay as long as you need. You want to talk about it? Not yet. Figured, he muttered. You bringing anything? I glanced down at myself, just a suit and dress shoes I had worn to the event. Nothing else. No bags, no belongings. Just me. That bad, huh? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Theo exhaled, his voice clearing of its sleepiness. Come over. I hung up without another word and started walking. Not toward my car. Not toward home. Toward something new. The city felt different that night. Sharper. More alive. I passed a little cafe where Nain and I used to spend lazy Sunday mornings sipping coffee and talking about nothing in particular. I passed a bookstore where I had once surprised her with a first edition of her favorite novel, and I felt nothing. No nostalgia. No longing. Just distance. By the time I reached Theo's apartment, the decision had already been made. I wasn't just leaving Nain. I wasn't just walking away from a bad marriage. I was erasing myself from the life she had built. By the time she realized it, I would already be gone. Theo opened the door before I could knock, standing there in an old hoodie and sweats, taking one look at me and sighing like a man who had seen this coming. Damn, he muttered, stepping aside. Come in before the neighbors start thinking you're some lost rich guy. I stepped inside, the scent of beer and old books filling the air. His place was exactly as I remembered, cluttered, lived in, real. Nothing about it felt fake, unlike the life I had just walked away from. Theo shut the door behind me, arms crossing over his chest. So, you finally pulled the trigger, huh? I let out a slow breath and ran a hand through my hair. She was dancing with him, Theo, not like coworkers, not like friends, like someone she'd been with before, like someone she'd been with for a long time. Theo let out a low whistle, shaking his head. Damn, and you just walked out. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Fight the guy? Demand an explanation? I let out a dry laugh and sank onto his couch. She would have just lied. She's been lying for months, maybe years. Tonight, I just finally saw it. Theo grabbed a beer from the fridge and tossed it to me. So what now? That was the question, wasn't it? What now? I twisted the cap off the bottle, but didn't take a sip. I just stared at it, as if the answer might be hiding in the amber liquid. I'm not going back, I said finally. Not to the apartment. Not to that life. I'm done. Theo nodded, like he had expected that answer. You need a plan, man. You can't just vanish and hope it all works itself out. But that was exactly what I planned to do. As I sat there, beer in hand, I made my decision. I wasn't going to explain myself to Nain. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I was going to disappear. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way that would make her chase after me. No, I would be erased. She would wake up and reach for me out of habit and find nothing. No note, no phone call, no last conversation. She would check her messages, expecting one of my usual let's talk when you get home texts. She would check our shared accounts, our routines, our life, and she would find emptiness. Because when you betray someone, you don't get closure. You get silence. I pulled out my phone and started untangling myself from everything that tied me to her world. Finances, moved to a private account. Insurance, remove her as a beneficiary. Rent, cancel my portion. She could figure it out. Everything that tethered me to her life, gone. She would wake up tomorrow thinking everything was normal. By lunchtime, she would realize her world had shifted in ways she never saw coming. Theo watched me in silence as I worked. When I was done, he nodded. Cold, he muttered, but I respect it. I exhaled, leaning back into the couch. And for the first time in years, I felt something new. Freedom. When I woke up the next morning, it wasn't in my apartment. It wasn't with the usual routine, Nain shuffling around, scrolling through her phone, pretending everything was fine between us while she texted whoever she thought I didn't know about. No, I woke up on Theo's lumpy couch, staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine, feeling lighter than I had in years. The previous night hadn't been a nightmare I could brush off. It had been clarity, and I wasn't mourning it. Somewhere across town, in the pristine apartment where we had built a life, Nain was waking up to an emptiness she never saw coming. I could picture it. She'd reach for her phone half awake, expecting a message from me. Something mundane like want to pick up coffee? Instead, she'd find nothing. No missed calls. No texts. She'd check the time, confused. She'd roll over, realizing I hadn't come home. And that's when the first real wave of panic would hit. She'd sit up, check my side of the closet. Empty. Toiletries, gone. Laptop, charger, personal files, missing. She'd search for clues, for anything, but there would be nothing to find. That's the thing about betrayal. People like Nain expect confrontation. They prepare for it. They have excuses ready, half-truths rehearsed. They want to fight, because a fight means they still have control. But silence? Silence is what destroys them. I checked my phone out of habit, expecting missed calls. There were none. Not yet, because Nain still believed she could brush this off. She still thought I'd be back. She had no idea. Theo walked into the kitchen, scratching his head, looking like a man who had witnessed far too much in one night. He grabbed a coffee, took a sip, and gave me a knowing look. You good? I nodded. Better than I should be. He exhaled. You sure you don't wanna? Nope. He didn't push. That's why Theo was Theo. He knew when to let a man process. And I was processing. Not in the way people do after a breakup. Analyzing every conversation. Replaying every moment. No, I wasn't dwelling. I was closing the book. Today wasn't about Nain. Today was about me. I had a new life to start. And she had a lesson to learn.